Wow.
Wow, I'm easily amused
Who
today.
designed that? They need to win a prize.
What's architecture really about? Archispeak is the show that dares to peek under the architectural kimono, exposing what architecture really is, what it is that architects really do, and show you why we are passionate about our chosen profession. I'm Neil Pan. Join Evan Troxel, Cormac Phelan, and me as we have a casual conversation about all things architecture, which includes all the stuff people don't talk about. Think you already know what architecture is really about? Tune in to find out. It's time for some Archispeak.
What was that thing we were, that was the big Twitter debate going on?
It started off as a discussion about craft, craft in our profession, but it developed into a conversation about whether or not you should have experience before you get licensed. The thing that I liked about what came out of the conversation was the dialogue about experience. Where you get experience. And we even started, finally talking about, the failing of school, right. and where we have, and both of you've taught, right?
Yep.
What did you guys teach? Did you guys teach?
I didn't teach.
Okay.
I taught digital media in connection with the design studio. So we basically directly supported design studio with the digital modeling and rendering, just how to do everything on the computer for 10 years. That's what I did.
So you were, to be quite honest with you, you're teaching them probably one of the most practical things that they could use coming out of school, versus in the case of most of the design studio, and maybe that's something that we talk about is, what do graduates actually get out of design studio? One of the things that we're looking for is we want them to think spatially, right?
Yep.
But we also want them to, what the profession would like them to do is not only be able to think spatially, but also be able to understand the process. From where I would be coming from on a new hire is being able to understand the process, how to be able to take a building from, square one to, completion, and at least understanding and having the connection between what we learn in design studio about thinking spatially and all these different types of ideas, and actually, almost teach a practical, like a practical approach to, let me try to get this right. Basically have a design studio. I guess this is my perfect world. Have a design studio. And we're talking about maybe third year. First and second year, I think we should teach exactly the way we're teaching. Have them understand, the craft of like drafting and sketching and drawing, understanding 3D, understanding perspective, understanding of space and the 3D world of it all, and understanding, how to transform, plan, section, and elevation into your 3D thinking. Teach all of that your first 2 years, and teach it pretty rigorously, but then be able to take that and start to teach different processes, group work, have a group project that goes the entire the entire year, that you have a group that you work together on, and they work from SDs all the way through to CDs, and then have individual Maybe you do third year is an individual project. Then you do a group project. And then if you're in a 5-year program or a 4-2 a 4-2 type program where you start to develop, maybe you're not too concerned in third year about them, understanding code and stuff like that, but you're more worried about them working as a group, working in a team environment. Because we're always going to be working in a team environment. Even the people who are self-practitioners, Neil, name one time that you've done a project on your own without an engineer or anybody else.
Oh, it hasn't happened.
Exactly. So we're always going to be working together. But what we're teaching right now is we're teaching them to work independently. and so they come in and they're...
At Cal Poly, I know that they do have some integrated classes where they do some, and they didn't do this when I was there, but since I've left, they've started integrating with structural engineering. And so they do a bridge design, and the architecture students kind of define the form, and the structural students come in, and basically like you're hiring a consultant, and they basically they do all the calcs, and they figure out what works, what doesn't work, what they can do to make it better, and then they basically go back and inform the design and say, here's what you need to do to make this idea work, and then they work together to come up with a solution. And I think that that's kind of what you're talking about, right? It's where you're starting to involve other members into the team that can actually get you closer to reality when it comes down to it.
Well, at Auburn, we've got, as the name of the school, kind of shows, it's the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction. We have a construction, all of our construction managers go through a program very similar to, what we go through. We always do projects, in our structures courses, our statics, steel, concrete, all these different courses that we go through. We're in the same class with the guys who are going to be graduating and becoming contractors. But there was always this feeling of separation between the two programs.
Sure.
And the problem there is that we're going to be spending our entire life working with these guys. And we're not going to, and we're, for some reason, they're, oh, goddamn architects, or, oh, goddamn contractors, and it, that's the last thing we need to be doing, is teaching the separation between all of these, these two trades, because we're going to rely on each other for the rest of our career. And it's interesting that, we're separating them.
I think back to the kind of original premise here, though, which is kind of the gap between education and the actual work environment. There is obviously this is a really tough problem to fix. And I think it's weird that I think that schools and the professional firms out there are bickering at each other. Okay, so the workforce is saying, you're not training people who can come in and do the work, and the school is like, well, we need better designers out there, if you're talking about design schools. So we need more and more. We need to train these students how to design, so that when they get to the workforce, they can learn the practical application of the tools of the trade to become good architects. It's kind of like they need each other, right? And nobody wants to say that. It's like everybody thinks that the school should be a fully developed program in 5 years. And I could tell you that people who are teaching in design school don't think 5 years is long enough to teach design, let alone all the other stuff. And that's why I think they only feel like they have time to touch on the other stuff. Technology changes so much that all of those programs, from the time you start school to the time you get out, is a much different picture in those 5 years. So why waste your time teaching all of that stuff where students could master Revit 2009 when they get into the workforce and the program's completely changed by the time they get out?
Oh, but see, that's the thing, though, is that first of all, there's that disconnect that we're talking about between school and the profession. Whereas the school is teaching more or less what they want to teach, or what they feel the profession of architecture should be.
But that's an accredited university, and who does the accreditation? It's not the school themselves.
And NCARB.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
Don't even get me started. I'm right there with you. I totally agree that there's accreditation's kind of a oxymoron, really. I mean, it's just kind of this, where we for some reason don't seem to, the profession complains about the schools and what they teach. The schools complain about the profession not getting involved with kind of directing the course of education. And until those two actually kind of marry up with each other, we're going to continue to have that problem. But I mean, I think with going back to the issue of technology, though, you can teach a bit of you can teach them the technology, and I mean, rather than going through the effort of just having them. I mean, take a seminar course of Revit. I had to take, as part of our requirement, I had to take a 3D modeling, which at the time was 3D Studio, and then I had to take a CAD type drafting seminar. So I took AutoCAD. I mean, that's what they were teaching at our school, and that's what I had to take to graduate. If you teach those, like say, starting in third year, going back to this kind of, teach things like drafting and hand sketching and all of the other things that we normally teach in first year, understanding, your spatial parameters, all of this stuff. Teach all of that in your first 2 years. Really get to, make it a boot camp for understanding the spatial qualities of a building, understanding how to translate things from 2D to 3D. But then as you're closing out your second year, or maybe the first quarter or first semester of your third year, you start to, require them to start learning some of the digital programs, CAD, Revit, things like that, and integrating that into the tools for Studio. So you still keep teaching them Design Studio, but using the digital as basically the final format of what what you're going to be presenting.
Well, when I was in school, they did teach a little bit of AutoCAD, but I mean, it was the most simplified thing you could ever. We were drawing everything by hand, and you even said teach them how to draw in first year. We never had a drawing class. Really? You were just expected to pick it up and learn it. Just like making models. They never did a modeling class. You just had to learn how to build real physical models on your own. And I kind of feel the same way, that same approach should be with digital modeling. It's a tool in your toolbox. You figure out what's best for you, and you learn it on your own time. Well, and then we teach the classes that actually let you, like AutoCAD or Revit, a tool that you can actually use in the workforce. That is an accepted tool.
Now, see, when I was in school, though, Cormac, when I was in school, I mean, we actually did have a drawing class. We had several of them in our first year of our program, back in the dark ages. Everything was done by hand, and we were taught the basics of perspective, how to generate a perspective. Not that I could remember how to do it now, but all the different things that were involved in that. And then we were also taught, in addition, we were taught how to letter.
Man, all that happened for me in high school.
Really?
Yeah.
I did some of that in high school, but none of that. That was first year stuff. Just the basics of how you do things.
But because people are coming from different paths into architecture, you've got transfer students. Here, I'm a great example. I did some drafting in high school, but I went from high school to the Army. And after I got out of the Army, I went into architecture school. So anything that I did learn was long gone. Right. And so you kind of needed to teach everybody, if it's the tabula rasa. They are all blank slates, and you, as the professor, hopefully working with, crafting these guys into what you think is what an architect's toolbox should have in it. You've got the blank slate. You're the one who gets to fill that slate with what you think they should have. And we had 3D perspective drawing, we had 2D drafting, we had watercolors. We had so many different courses. I mean, we did model building. We also did. We had this one course, and it might have been in a studio as part of a studio class, but we actually had to make molds, to make bricks, make basically like about 1,000, miniature bricks that were like maybe an inch by inch and a half. I mean, it was just these like miniature bricks at the right scale to a normal sized brick. But we had to go through the tedious little process of making each brick and then making a model using all of those bricks. And it was, we were all sitting there, this is so tedious. But the thing that I actually appreciated about that process is that we were learning that each brick, that we put, here's me reflecting now, 15 years later, here's, my opinion about what that was. Back then I thought it sucked and my hands hurt and I really wish that we didn't do it. But reflecting back on it, all of those courses that I learned, the hand drafting and everything else, taught me that each line meant something. Each brick meant something.
Yeah.
How to translate your renderings, like, in our watercolor classes, how to translate those into the next step of the process and moving on and on and on up the ladder of the process. Everything, so it's almost like ditch the computer for the first 2 years. We're going to spend the rest of our career on the computer. Ditch the computer, teach them the basics that every one of us, you learned in high school, Neil, you learned in college, and I definitely learned in college. Teach them all of the basics that we've kind of gotten away from because we were like, we don't really need hand drafting because we're going to be doing it in the computer. But if you teach them hand drafting, and I'm going to say this till I'm blue in the face forever. If you teach them basic hand drafting, that person will learn and appreciate what each line means. Because, until we build off of the model, it's going to be a 2D plan. And just like I just encountered probably about a week ago, or even, maybe just 4 days ago, contractor called me up and said, hey, it looks like you've got furring on this wall, but there's no wall tag. What's it supposed to be? Well, yep, I actually drew a series of lines, and when we were going through the tagging process, since we were doing it all in Revit, somehow a lot of the tags in one particular room got turned off. You turn the view on, and you could see that they were all there, but for some reason it got turned off. So what we failed to do is we failed to tag what all of those lines meant. But we sat there and we drew them, and then when you look at it, you're like, yep, it should be this, and then you kind of
we don't have that problem when we draw by hand. By the way, there's no layers that get turned off.
Actually, and that's actually a good thing though, but because when you're, I guess the point that I'm trying to make about that, and I kind of sorry about the little tangent there. But the point that I was trying to make is we drew all of the lines, and if you know...
And you only drew the lines you needed. Yeah.
And if you drew only the lines you needed, at least when you're looking at the 2D printout of your Revit model, you at least say, okay, I'm showing that wall's furred out, but I'm not showing the tag. Let me do my red line and tag it that is, a type H wall or something like that. You know where I'm going with it. That we needed, you need to understand that. Whereas somebody who's not learning all of this stuff, when they see a line that's drawn in Revit and it doesn't have a tag on it, they don't really know what it means. They just think that it's a really fat line or a really skinny line.
Yeah.
Well,
it's all about the graphics. Yeah.
Exactly. But we build off of the graphics. We construct our buildings off of those graphics. So we need to understand how to translate those graphics from the line we draw to the actual stud wall with 5/8 inch high impact drywall, and what all of that means. Yeah. So that's why I think that us seemingly abandoning all of the hand drafted media to go straight to the digital media, it's almost ridiculous to do that. And this is truly my opinion here.
Well, let's be honest, though. I mean, there's a lot of buildings now that are built that utilize digital fabrication techniques that can't, they're almost impossible to draw by hand. If there's a video, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes, by shop architects who are constructing things in the computer, in Revit, whatever, in Rhino, and using Grasshopper, whatever it is, that there is no way you could do it by hand. And they're even taking their drawing sets to a level where, and it's super, super interesting. They actually will have all of the shop drawings come right out of the model. Everything is detailed to that level. They'll even have it where the stuff that's coming off the CNC or off the laser cutter, 4,000 unique individual parts that have etchings on them that tell the fabricator how to weld it and how long to make the weld, and it's etched right into the part. And I mean, there's things like that can be achieved. And so I don't think that the argument between hand, analog and digital is black and white.
Well, no. That's truly not what I mean. What I mean is during your education process, teach them how to do it by hand, because then
you learn the meaning behind it. Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect example is what you just said. There's no way that you could hand draft a lot of the details that are coming out today, especially with these specialty programs that are doing things that are hooked directly up to the CNC machine, 3D printers, and stuff like that. But at least you have the process to understand. It's a translation of spatial thinking as well, though. When you're drafting everything by hand and you just can't quite get it, I will immediately revert to, like, say, massing something up in, say, SketchUp or Revit to kind of understand what I'm trying to get at, move it around, do my 360 views and stuff, just to try to make sure I get that what I was trying to do by hand before I input it into the computer. Then I've got it right, and then I can print out a couple of views, sketch it up real quick, go back to the computer, work out those details, and kind of go back and forth.
I totally work that way. Yep.
But when you don't understand how to start with the sketch, you're never going to really understand what the limitations or the abilities of the 3D modeling programs are going to have. Because you're not fully aware of what all of the spatial requirements are of what you're trying to work out. Yeah. So you really don't know how to work them out in the computer. You just, the Revit drew this window, so that's what I think this window should look like.
Right.
Oh, no. When you look at it in elevation, you're like, well, that's nothing like what I wanted it to be.
Yeah, I think you're right about going back and forth. That's I do that all the time, and I feel like that helps me develop my understanding of the space even further, because that's really what it's about, right? It's, I posted it on my blog last week where I was working on the inside of this theater, and, I built a real dumb model, then I printed out some views, I sketched on top of them, then it helped me form my understanding of the space, of what I wanted to achieve. And then I can go back into the model, and I can start to develop that further, and then I'm going to print out a couple more views, and I'm going to sketch over the top of it again, and reformulate, and then do it. And it's this process of back and forth. The people who scare me are the ones who never pull out a sketchbook, you
Right,
know?
right.
And I feel like, something I would like to talk about is one of the detriments that I've seen with digital modeling is when, especially on these larger projects where you've got lots of buildings that are coming together to form a campus or, a grouping. I think one of the problems that I see happen all the time is that what the modeling environment allows us to do is work in this vacuum. And, this is something that we talk about at work between, my friends and me. It's like that can be detrimental because somebody's working on this piece of the building over here. And then you bring in the whole work sharing thing in Revit where multiple people are working in the same building at the same time. And again, they're in their own worlds. And you see this thing coming together that's kind of a Frankenstein. But, what SketchUp or any 3D modeling application allows you to do is spin this building around endlessly and look at it from any view. But rarely are you taking into consideration the context that is right next to that building.
Exactly.
And rarely are you focusing on a particular task where when we were working on drafting boards and I was working on a performing arts building, I could focus on the lobby and I could draw just the lobby at a larger scale to understand what's going on with the handrails coming off of the stairway and the planter and the way that the curtain wall comes together with the columns. And now, if I'm in Revit or FormZ or SketchUp or whatever, and I'm spinning this model around and I'm looking at it from this view and then that view, and it's kind of this never-ending movement, I feel like we're not even able to just sit and think about something, right? We're looking busy, and we're trying to develop the whole thing all at the same time to the same level. And I feel like a lot of opportunities are lost when we're doing that.
Well, how much of that is just, you got to step back and look at it. And like you mentioned earlier, you print it out, you sketch over it, or, you learn how to focus, or you try and learn how to focus. Now, that doesn't necessarily address the issue of, one person working on a part of a building and another part of a building, and, everybody's kind of not talking and such. But that's that. To a certain extent, that's part of the process. I mean, you go, you work on a portion of it, and then you kind of bring it back, and everybody sits down. Yeah, everybody comes back together. Oh, okay. Yep. How or you discover things through that process too. I mean, that also not only something you do in school, but in the workforce. In the office. I mean, okay, you go. Okay, how does this work? Oh, we're not really sure. Okay, let me go back over to this person who's working over on that portion of the building. Hey, how does this interface over here? And then you just, and that's just a part of the process. And you go back and you do that. And, Cormac, that kind of a little bit goes back to what you were talking about in school about making sure everybody's working together, Yeah,
I totally agree.
And I think that would be great. I mean, we had some classes at Cal Poly in San Luis where we did work as groups. In fact, a second-year design course where we started the course, I think, working individually to develop. Actually, it was kind of an interesting course because we started at the beginning creating a family of characters, and we designed a house for those characters. And then we had to write bios about them and, who are these people and what are their wants, their needs, and things like that. And then we designed a house for them. We all kind of did that as an individual project. And then after the first 2 or 3 weeks of doing that, we then kind of chose who we wanted to work with. And then we had a larger site. I said, okay, now you've got 4 families. They all own this site. And now we have to integrate them all. And so it was a really interesting process because now we had to take our individual people that we had created and then put them on a site and design houses, and or some people did a large community building and other people did smaller individual houses that all fit together on a lot. But it was a great process because the whole quarter, except for the first maybe couple of weeks, we had to work as a team. So there were 4 of us with, multiple families and, somewhat make-believe characters that had different wants and needs and desires. And it was really very interesting. Now, in the case, we weren't bringing in outside type consult, and there was no engineering involved or no, landscape or construction or anything, but it was just 4 architects all having to work together to create, something that would all come, work as a whole. And then we presented it that way. And that was a real interesting way to kind of figure out, something we talked about in our last podcast, who's doing more work than the next person. And, what was interesting was that for my group, we all pushed each other and we all worked together pretty well as a team. But the interesting part was that was a second year design course. And we worked so closely and so intense for so many hours together in that second year design class. I don't think we ever spoke to each other after that class.
Wow.
Well,
it ruined us.
I'm wondering why that is, though. Because we were kind of talking pre-show about the basically the long time, the lifelong collaboration that we're going to have for the rest of our careers. Not only with our fellow architects, engineers, contractors. I mean, we're all going to be collaborating because that's the only way you truly get a building done. Collaborate with the client, collaborate with the building officials. I mean, collaborate. That is the one word that I don't know if it's preached enough in architecture school, and it has to be. It should be. I mean,
well, look at the NCARB tests. I mean, those things are testing you, assuming that you're going to be the sole practitioner.
Exactly.
And so they are feeding right into that.
Well,
because that's kind of quote unquote worst case scenario, right?
Well,
you have to be able to do this by yourself.
And maybe when you test that way, maybe that's good because you are trying to ensure that one particular individual is competent enough to be able to, essentially take the liability, sign and seal a set of documents, and, create and have a building built. So if in the worst case scenario that one person is only going to work with themselves, then you want to make sure that they're competent enough. So we're using the ARE and the NCARB, model as a way to, at least ensure that one person is competent enough to practice. And like we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that, and this is something I don't really want to get off on a tangent on now because I really like where we're going here. But, it's, when should we be testing? How much experience should we be requiring when we test? But let me ask you this. Now, we had at Auburn, we have the Rural Studio. I don't know if either one of you are familiar with the Rural Studio and what Sam Mockbee did.
Yeah.
Well, what that was is that was an opportunity starting in second year to be a part of a collaborative design build effort where we find the clients, an actual breathing client, design in collaboration with that client, figure out how the project's going to be funded, whether it's through donated material and labor, or whether or not there's, some kind of like grants out there that they could get the money for. And then actually go through the process of creating enough documentation to build the project and then build it. So it's a year-long studio. And at the end of the year, not necessarily the second year students are actually building something, but they're part of a team that actually goes from soup to nuts, design to construction. And the thing that we liked about that, now we've had several
What's
different
not
programs.
to like about that?
Exactly. There were several different programs at Auburn. There's one that we have that's in town, in the actual city of Auburn, that we basically are running in conjunction with Habitat for Humanity, projects like that, where we work with Habitat, and in fact, it's called Design Habitat, where we we pull everybody together, we do the design work, we do all of the build work. What that's teaching them is when you're drawing a line, what does that line mean when you yourself, who drew that line, are actually swinging the hammer to construct that line? What does that mean?
Yeah. That's an awesome program, by the way. I didn't know that they had that. I think that's great. It's free labor, but what a great educational tool.
Well, in that particular case, the great thing about that studio, and if you get an opportunity to go to the website and take a look at the actual work that's being done there, a lot of people worry about, well, if you teach them tectonics too quickly, they're going to get so bogged down in making it buildable that they're not going to, that design is going to suffer. And that's not the case. The thing about it is that I truly believe programs like that, and just the need to early on understand tectonics and how things go together, is that you're never going to be able to design outside the parameters of what your building material can do. And we can clearly see that you can do damn near anything with some building material. I mean, Frank is a great example. Any of these people, that you can go down the list of all these different architects who stretch the building material further and further than we thought was humanly possible. So teaching people tectonics too early, to me, just seems like a cop-out to the bigger issue of should we be teaching design separate from tectonics in the first place?
Well, and when you're doing design, I did design build for a few years with a partner of mine, Iggy, and we had a great time designing to a point and then continuing to design as we fabricated.
Right.
And I think that, we're definitely caught up with the separation of the different segments of the building industry to where, it's basically ruled by litigation. And that's been detrimental, right? Because now our drawing sets are 3 times as big as they need to be because it's all cover your ass. And then you totally miss out on those opportunities to innovate while building by doing it that way.
Well, I think there's also something lost in the collaboration process as well. I mean, through the engineer and the architect. At least when I was doing production homes, I mean, we designed the house, throw it off to the engineer, and they would do their thing, and then we'd get it back, and it was done. And there was very little communication that happened between the two. Occasionally, we would get a setback, or get a call, hey, can you move this window over a few inches or something okay, so that we eliminate a beam or something. I can put a post here, and everything will work. But sometimes that collaboration wasn't even happening. And so then when it goes out to the field, they complained, or when it got priced by the home builder, like, wow, why is this house so expensive to build? Well, because, quite honestly, there was no collaboration. And that was started with litigation. I mean, because before, when I first started, we would do a lot of the structural drafting. And that gave us some opportunity to collaborate back and forth with the engineer. And then through litigation, it was like, no, you guys do your own drafting. We don't want to be a part of that. We don't want to get sued for your drawings, essentially. And you sort of still get wrapped up in it, but if your name's not on it, there's some separation there. And I think there's a breakdown. I mean, one of the things I did when I worked for a national home builder as a project, a forward planner essentially. But one of the things when I took over the kind of architectural development in our division was very first thing when we started a project was, okay, I brought in the HVAC guys, the plumbing, the framer, the architect, the engineer, everybody I could think of was in a kind of a big kickoff meeting. When we had some preliminary designs done. I was like, okay, Mr. Engineer, where's your comments? Or, hey, can we run HVAC through here? Can we run plumbing through there? Oh, I need that beam changed, different, or I can't run through there. So a lot of these problems, some of this is being dealt with now digitally, and that's great. But at the time, none of us were that far along. So we kind of had to talk about it. But we all got into a big room, and we dealt with these issues, because if we didn't, the alternative was we were dealing with these issues all standing around a house that's completely framed. I was like, okay.
You mean you were pointing fingers at that point?
Absolutely, yeah. There were definitely lots of finger pointing going on, and who's paying for what, and those are really uncomfortable conversations to have out in the field. So I think that has hurt the profession, and I think it like Cormac said, like you said at the beginning, that we're taught to work individually. And there needs to be more collaborative. And this program you're talking about sounds like a great way to, bolster our education to teach that collaborative process, and that, what you draw on the page or what you model ends up being what you build, and it means something.
Well, I think one of the other things that's missing, what you were talking about with, the coordination meetings and stuff like that, that clearly should happen, on any and every project of almost every scale. Just because you're wanting it to be, a complete project, where you've fully thought everything out, and you've crossed all your I's and dotted all your T's and stuff like that. So, you've gotten all that stuff done. But
you are an architect, aren't you?
Exactly. I didn't say I could spell. No, but and Evan, you were saying this, that one of the things that this kind of separation of our professions has created is a lack of creativity and kind of a lack of understanding the tectonics. Where the great thing about, these drawings back in the day when, you go and you find, like, say, a Frank Lloyd Wright set of documents for Unity Temple. I mean, I bring that up because, I had an opportunity to see those documents and how small those documents really were in comparison to the complexity of the building that's actually there. And it was because, Frank Lloyd Wright had an understanding of how a building went together and could stand out on site and orchestrate the construction and detailing on the fly. Well, and the thing about it is that we don't do is that, we want them to hold tight to the, to the budget. We want them to hold tight to the, design documents. And if anything changes, whose fault is it?
Yeah.
Who designed this window this way instead of that way? Well, it's like, well, the window still looks the way that your design wants to. It's just we decided to build it a little bit differently to make it easier for construction, but also, so being able to sit down and I actually appreciate and love the opportunities that I have out on site when I'm doing CA to learn from the contractors and sit there and say, well, okay, here's how I designed it. This is what I want it to look like. But let me ask you, is there an easier way to build it and still make it look the same way that's going to be able to have, the plumbing, pass through the structure without, any problems? And, you just go through the brainstorming idea of how are we going to get this thing built?
Yeah.
How are we going to maintain the, life safety qualities of it? How are we going to make sure it's still code compliant, blah, 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 and all this other crap? When we constantly lose the ability to create the collaborative effort, which, to bring it back home, bring it back to where we started this conversation. When we lose that ability to collaborate, we're losing our ability to learn.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of killing me here is that,
when you look at it from an attitude of I know it all and then follow these documents exactly, and then the contractor's thinking, well, I know it all. There's nothing right about these. and then it becomes this headbutting scenario. I mean, I feel like the best situations that the most fun I had doing design build was problem solving in the moment, building it.
Exactly.
Because you could not have foreseen this condition that showed up. There's no way. And so it's an opportunity at that point. It's not something where you're going to look for somebody to blame. In that scenario, you don't have anybody to blame, and that's not even something that pops into your mind. What you're thinking is, okay, how do I figure this out? And that's definitely the biggest takeaway I had from working with my partner. He was so good at that. Okay, we could do this 3 different ways. Here's how we can do it. And it was like, how did you think of those 3 different ways so quickly? But he was just had such a knack for problem solving in the moment when something came up. That was like you said, you like to learn from the contractor when they can come up with an idea. And that's totally what that scenario was for me. And I totally agree with that. You want to be in a learning-based scenario as much as possible.
Well, something else that ties into this a little bit is a recent project that I was involved in, and this is kind of approaching what we're talking about from another way that sometimes this can be beneficial to the building process. And where I'm going with this is that I was involved in a project to do a remodel, a fairly large-scale, high-end custom home remodel, and we were just getting into the process and talking fees, and the client was getting a little nervous about that and what it was going to cost, and they just started to talk to a GC, that general contractor, that is, who was familiar with the area, that was going to provide everything: architecture, engineering, landscaping, and the construction. And where I'm going with this is that their total fee for all of this was essentially going to be much, much lower. And that got me thinking and this goes back to a little bit of the design build process, because that's essentially what they were going to end up doing, is that it can bring your costs down on the front side so much. Because, we were approaching it as, okay, we're the architects and we have to do X, and we're not going to make any money on the construction or the markups of the materials or anything. So we have to make our money doing the drawings and doing the design and being involved in that process. Mm-hmm. And, they were approaching it where, okay, we need to save as much money as possible. And if these guys are going to do this project all inclusive for a cheaper fee, where they will make their money on materials and appliances, the things that they can mark up later down the road, they can give away the design or the architecture, not for free, but certainly at a much lower cost than what we could provide it. And that gets me thinking to the future of our profession. And is that more the future, or does that need to be more the future of our profession, where we do get more involved in designing and building either our own projects or projects where we partner with other clients on, so that we can make money on the back end or the construction side, and not have to make all of our money just on the front end. Where in this case, it hurts the clients. They're going to spend a lot of money doing design. They'll probably end up with a better design, in my opinion, but for different reasons. But, I'm just wondering, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. But I think that affects, what we're talking about a little bit, is that the costs can be affected by this as well.
Well, I think it depends on how much control you want to have. I think a lot of times that things get marginalized throughout the process. And once it leaves your desk, you don't have as much control over that as you'd like. And so I think a lot of people do want to start looking in that direction. I know a lot of people have been. And then I also know architects who don't want to have anything to do with that. So, I don't think it's not black or white, but I think for those of us who do want that control to the end, where you are taking control of your craft all the way through to delivery, then you have to look at that. There's no other way to do it.
But see, that kind of points out the problem, and it's kind of a, having control of your project all the way through. You're not necessarily talking about, I want to have this kind of overbearing, egotistical control. You want to be able to ensure that you're involved with the project throughout.
Yes.
To ensure that the quality of the design translates through to the quality of the construction, and that, you're involved with any decisions that might change or alter it, not necessarily because, you're kind of like this egomaniac that needs to control it, but you want to ensure that the final product is exactly what everyone was hoping for.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of times when, we've got the, as everybody, seems to peg us all as this egotistical, overbearing type profession that, it's the architect's way or the highway kind of thing. I don't think this is necessarily what 9/10 of this profession is about. It's making sure that we get, the quality of work from design through construction all the way through. So everyone, not just the architect, but the contractor, the owner, everybody's happy, because, when you get that level of satisfaction, at the end of the project, then everybody can use it as a marketing tool. You're most likely going to get, repeat business, not only from, say, the client, but also from the contractor, who will say, well, I had a great experience working with Evan on this project or Neil on this project. They delivered service, above and beyond what we normally expect or what we were going into expecting from an architect. And I want to use them again. So it's that, it's that service with the smile, and not service with vinegar.
But Cormac, sometimes what you mentioned, everybody's happy. Sometimes what your client is happy with isn't necessarily in line with what you're going to be happy with. And I know on an earlier podcast, I referenced a project I did where the stucco guy decided that the trims needed to be different, and he just changed them. And the client was happy with it, so they're happy. The contractor's happy. And then I go and I'm very sad because it's it's not what I intend. It's not what I intended. It's not what I drew. It's not what I envisioned. It's not what they thought they were going to originally get, and it watered down the design. It changed the design, and suddenly that marketing tool I was hoping for, it's like, I don't think I'll be photographing this project.
Yeah. But see, that's what I'm getting at, is that wasn't a collaborative process. That was a cut and nail out of the process. We talked about it, that you weren't involved with basically the CA process. You just, you handed over your design documents, and, with them not including you in the CA process, essentially it was, you're going to get what you get kind of thing. And you were never actually, fully kind of like involved with with it all. So,
right.
And that's the thing, is that, how do you make a fully immersive, fully collaborative project? I think a lot of times they cut us out of it because of the financial factor. They think, Neil's going to be too expensive to have as part of this process, so we're going to cut him out of it. But 9 times out of 10, what happens is that if they involve Neil in the process, then Neil would be there to be able to maintain the quality control, maintain the compliance to the documents, or be there to kind of troubleshoot any changes or any unforeseen conditions that, could either catastrophically cost the owner a crap load of money, or just, you see, you were cut out of the process of quality control.
Not only that, but in addition, I'm also cut out of the education process. There's probably mistakes or things that happen on that project that I'm not aware of. I was involved. I wasn't paid to be in it. I can volunteer my time. I can go there. And I did do that a couple of times and learned a couple of things. Oh, okay, I screwed up here. Don't do that again, or try not to. But you're cut out of that education process too. And I wonder how much of, getting back to our architectural education we talked a little bit about, when we started, which is, how, I did take, at Cal Poly, we did do kind of documentation. I mean, we went through the AIA documents and then, of course, studied more of that when I got out of school for my license. But I wonder how much of that needs to also be involved in our education. Go through that and have us have a better understanding. And this goes back to our Twitter conversation earlier this past week, where, how much because I think if I had talked about some of these things in school, which I know we did in that one document class I took where we had to write a contract and enter into a contract with our professor and stuff like that. But you know what? Because I didn't have the experience, I didn't understand half the stuff we were doing, in retrospect. I mean, I could read it, I can kind of get it, but without the experience to kind of draw on, I didn't really fully understand it. And that our Twitter conversation was about that, which involved a number of people jumping in at different points. But, when should you get your license and stuff like that? But it's like, without that experience, then part of your education, you don't understand it as well.
Yeah, that was a big topic. I don't know if we should start talking about that at this point.
No, probably not. But it strikes me as something that as part of our architectural education. How can we learn to avoid? Now, we're not going to learn to avoid all of these different aspects of our career during our education, because maybe 5 years or 4 years of a degree is not enough time to cover everything when you're trying to learn some of the basics of the foundation of our profession. But there is a connection between learning on the go and how much of that can you front load into your education.
Yeah, I think that again, that's another topic, but or it's just a lot longer conversation.
Well, I mean, actually, every time that we go through these conversations, I think probably 100 different topics come up that we could either run off on a tangent or save for another day. So, I mean, I think in relationship to what we were talking about with that kind of Twitter ranting that we were doing and Twitter conversation that we had, I think that might be a different topic altogether. It's just, we did address some of the, I guess, I don't know if we want to know if we should call it educational shortcomings, but just, maybe now that we've been in the profession as long as we have, we would like to see education, geared a different way to prepare students, future architects more, and you're right. 4, 5, 6 years really isn't, we just don't have the time to really kind of, bring all of the, all of the different kind of like pitfalls and everything else that we've kind of learned throughout the time. And hell, even goes to, whether or not a professor should be somebody that has, X amount of years of experience before they actually teach. I mean, that's a different rant altogether.
Well, yeah. And also, I mean, one of the things that I definitely experienced when I was teaching was you've got students of all different abilities in there.
Exactly.
And if that's not one of the hardest things to deal with, one of the things that I like to talk about with people is learning without a speed limit. I wish there was no speed limit as to which I could take on the stuff and learn it. But when you're in a situation like that, there's definitely a speed limit, and it's definitely probably lower than you want because of all of the different abilities of people in there with you. And so, I mean, that's if that's one of the most frustrating things about teaching, and I would think that that's probably one of the biggest reasons why, because there's going to be people who can say, 5 years, heck yeah, you should be able to learn it all in that time. And then there's other people who are teaching in those scenarios thinking, man, how am I going to accomplish what I want to accomplish in 5 years?
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, you almost have to treat the early years of architectural education as a boot camp. Break it down. This is a basic training. You've got in basic training, you've got so many different people coming from different walks of life with different levels of ability and different levels of, understanding certain things.
Yeah.
So what they do is they break everybody down to zero.
Yep.
They
You have to
assume
unlearn.
you don't know. Exactly.
We had to unlearn our bad habits.
Yeah. They break you down and build you back up to exactly what they want you to be. And in a way, that's sort of what I would almost say that any profession should do that, because then you have this you have a baseline level of competency that you have with everybody in the profession, that that education has prepared them for, at least the bare minimum stuff. It's like designing to the code. You've designed the bare minimum structure, but at least that bare minimum structure is competent enough to continue to stand.
Well, one of my most memorable experiences came in my first or second week of school at Cal Poly, and my professor said, we're going to be working really hard to break you of all your bad habits, and we're going to basically you're going to have to unlearn what you've learned since kindergarten. And one of the most detrimental things that you learned in kindergarten was that you have to color inside the lines. And I thought that was an eye-opening experience for me as soon as I heard that. All right, let's save some more of this for next time. So for all of you still listening, you can follow us on Archispeak on Twitter. That's ARCHISPK, and you can follow along with the show on archispeakpodcast.com, and that's all spelled out the way that it sounds, archispeakpodcast.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at ETROXEL.
And you can follow me at NPANN on Twitter.
And you can follow me at Archetype, ARCHY_TYPE on Twitter.
Cool. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Frank and you. My funeral was beautiful. Oh, we got it for days on end. Thank God I'm cut, 'cause of my kind of luck. I'll be up on the block in front of all of my friends. This is what you get. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable lest you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's so predictable as you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. Top to the basement. Blow by blow, kinds of steel, very real, very rock, but it's still very rock body. Paper, scissors, sister, preach, deep, open the reach, fast and abs. Back jumps on pages, after still the race, a new tool and a toy book. Oh, and this is what you get. This is what you get. This is a schedule, this is a set. It's so predictable as you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's so predictable as you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know.